Welcome to The Female Criminal. Tonight we delve into a true crime phenomenon so rare, it chills the blood. Now, this episode is a bit different. For the first time, we're covering a case involving two female serial criminals, instead of our usual one. They were famously dubbed the Lethal Lovers, and their story is one of the most chilling examples of shared deviance. This is the case of Gwendolyn Graham and Cathy Wood, two women who turned a trusted sanctuary for the elderly into their own private hunting ground. In the quiet, sterile halls of a Michigan nursing home, they formed a bond built on manipulation, submission, and a shared deadly thirst for power. Between 1987 and 1989, these two women, paid to care for the vulnerable, instead became agents of terror, murdering at least 5 helpless patients. Their method was silent. Their motive was psychological. Their story is a stark reminder that some of the most profound acts of evil are not committed alone, but in a horrific, codependent pact. This is the unsparing account of the Lethal Lovers. The crimes took place in the small, unassuming community of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Our subjects, Gwen Graham and Cathy Wood, were both nurses' aides, working together in the quiet halls of the Alpine Manor Nursing Home. Gwen Graham, born Gwendolyn Gale Jones in 1963, was immediately recognizable as the dominant force. She wasn't just troubled, she was defined by an overwhelming, corrosive need for absolute control and power. Graham exuded a false charisma, using it as a tool to size up and manipulate those around her. She didn't seek equals in her life. She sought possessions. In the isolated environment of the nursing home, where control over fragile life was inherent to the job, Graham found the perfect hunting ground not just for victims, but for a partner. She was actively looking for an emotional and sexual accomplice, someone who could be molded, mastered, and ultimately exploited. That partner arrived in the form of Cathy Wood. Cathy Wood was everything Graham desired in a target, and everything Graham was not in personality. Submissive, quiet, and profoundly insecure. Wood came into the relationship carrying deep emotional scars and a tumultuous personal history, including raising 2 children. This background had left her with a desperate need for validation, affection, and a sense of belonging. Wood was emotionally raw, making her highly susceptible to the love bombing and manipulative force of Gwen Graham. When the two women met at Alpine Manor, the attraction was immediate and consuming. They quickly entered a codependent romantic and sexual relationship, but it was dangerously unbalanced from the start. For Wood, Graham felt like salvation, a powerful figure offering the attention and protection she had always craved. She was so desperate to hold on to Graham that she would eventually agree to any demand, no matter how dark. But Graham's affection came with a devastating price: absolute, unwavering dominance. To secure control, Graham began a systematic process of isolation and emotional destruction. She methodically tore down Wood's self-esteem, using criticism and mind games. She forced Wood to cut ties with her children and her past life, making Graham the single, crucial center of Wood's universe. It quickly evolved from a romance into a pathological partnership, built entirely on Graham's control and Wood's desperate need to please. It was a relationship so toxic and so singularly focused that it demanded a shared secret to sustain itself. And soon, that pathological nature found a truly terrifying outlet, one that would transition their codependency from a personal nightmare into a shared homicidal fantasy, officially defining them as the Lethal Lovers. The stage for this reign of terror was the Alpine Manor Nursing Home, a place where vulnerability was the only constant. It housed the most defenseless members of the community, patients suffering from Alzheimer's, advanced dementia, and terminal illnesses. These individuals were entirely dependent on their caretakers, the very people sworn to protect them for their basic survival. The irony is profound. the one place designed to offer safety and dignity in life's final moments, became, in the hands of the lethal lovers, a perfect isolated sanctuary of suffering. This environment was not simply a workplace for Graham and Wood. It became a private stage, where their shared escalating fantasies of power could be acted out without consequence. It's crucial to understand the initial motive in this case. It was not money. There was no insurance fraud, no inheritance scheme. It was not revenge against the institution or the individuals. Their motive was something far more chilling. Pure sadistic thrill and absolute control. Gwen Graham began discussing her darkest fantasies with Cathy Wood. She spoke of the intense rush derived from holding a life in her hands, from wielding ultimate power over someone who could not fight back, speak out, or even bear witness against them. This was the ultimate expression of the dominance Graham craved, and Wood, desperate to please her partner and maintain their relationship, did not object. She enabled. The specific nature of their victims, the elderly and infirm, was integral to their crime. Graham and Wood actively sought patients who were already close to death or who had debilitating conditions that would make their passing appear entirely natural. The inability of the victims to speak, fight back, or even accurately recall an event made them, in the warped minds of the lethal lovers, the perfect silent victims. The killing started in early 1987. The first confirmed victim was Robert Lee Evans, an elderly patient who died in a manner that aroused zero suspicion from doctors or administrators. The method was terrifyingly simple: suffocation. The execution of the crime was clinical and cold. The victims would be covered with a pillow, a towel, or suffocated, using the women's own hands until they expired. Because of the patient's age and pre-existing health conditions, the death would be routinely and quickly certified as natural causes. Every time a body was removed, the absence of a struggle and the silence of the victims ensured that the perfect crime had been committed again. This success only fueled the women's psychological bond, convincing them that they were untouchable and deepening their commitment to their lethal pact. Over a period spanning nearly 2 years, the two women are linked to the deaths of at least 5 elderly patients, though Gwen Graham later claimed the body count was higher, potentially reaching 10 or 11 victims. The confirmed victims that formed the basis of her conviction were 5. This series of attacks turned the nursing home into a statistical anomaly, a place where patients were expiring at a rate that, while not enough to raise official suspicion, was a profound tragedy. We must name the victims whose final moments were stolen by the lethal lovers. The confirmed deceased include Robert Lee Evans, Viola Cricker, Rachel Bell, Bessie Griffin, and Marguerite Adams. The methods were chillingly consistent and cruelly intimate. Graham, the executioner, would use a pillow, a red scarf, or her bare hands to smother and suffocate the victims, ending their lives in the place they were meant to be safest. For a period, Graham allegedly engaged in a deeply unsettling practice of documenting their murders. She was rumored to have kept a secret list of the deceased, and even to have written the victims' initials on her work clothing as a macabre trophy, a physical manifestation of her psychological dominance. Graham's role was clear. She chose the victims and carried out the execution, feeding her ego with every silent death. She was not driven by rage, but by an intoxicating sense of omnipotence. She was a thrill killer, using the elderly as her ultimate prey. But Graham's atrocities could not have continued without her other half. Cathy Wood's role was just as critical, serving as the essential lookout, the confidant, and the willing accomplice who provided validation for every heinous act. Wood kept watch outside the doors, ensuring no other staff members or family interrupted Graham's dark ritual. The silence and the absolute complicity of the lethal lovers allowed their reign of terror to continue unchecked, as they had created an airtight system of murder within a system designed for care. As the killings continued, the dynamic within the lethal lovers twisted further. While Graham found empowerment, Wood was increasingly consumed by overwhelming guilt and corrosive fear. She was constantly afraid that Graham, in a fit of possessive rage or boredom, would one day turn the pillow on her. Yet, her fear of losing Graham, her anchor, her obsession, was stronger than her moral repulsion. She continued to participate, enabling this horrific series of murders. This dangerous relationship, built on shared malice and codependency, had to reach a breaking point, or the killing would never stop. For 2 years, the codependent relationship between Gwen Graham and Cathy Wood was a pressure cooker, sustained only by the incredible high of their shared serial murder secret. But the sheer volume and grotesque nature of their crimes eventually made that secret too heavy to bear. The volatile relationship between the lethal lovers inevitably soured, culminating in a bitter, explosive breakup. Graham, a woman incapable of sustained intimacy or commitment, discarded Wood just as easily as she discarded her victims. Ever the dominant manipulator, Graham moved on quickly, finding a new girlfriend. This act of cold, immediate replacement shocked and devastated Wood, who had sacrificed everything, her morality, her family ties, and her sanity, for Graham's approval. Wood's jealousy, combined with the crushing weight of her guilt, became an emotional tidal wave. The horrific secret that had once bound them together now became the most potent weapon they would use against each other. Wood realized that the only way to escape Graham's emotional dominance, and the only way to guarantee her own security, was to destroy Graham's world. In 1989, Cathy Wood, consumed by a cocktail of fear, overwhelming guilt, and vengeful jealousy, walked into the Grand Rapids Police Department. She did not seek to protect herself at first. She simply needed to talk. She offered a confession that was so detailed, so dark, and so shocking that it shattered the quiet reputation of Alpine Manor and exposed one of the most horrific serial murder conspiracies in Michigan history. Wood admitted her role in the killings and, most importantly, immediately and emphatically implicated Gwen Graham as the primary killer and instigator. Her testimony was immediate, raw, and convincing. Wood's strategy was clear. She painted herself as the manipulated, frightened accomplice who participated only out of a desperate, twisted love and fear for Graham. Police were initially skeptical. Serial murder, committed by 2 female nurses' aides inside a nursing home, was virtually unheard of. However, Wood's forensic-level knowledge of the victims, the timing of the deaths, the specific rooms, and the uniform methodology convinced detectives that they were dealing with the truth. They immediately began the complex process of exhuming the bodies of the victims, though forensic evidence was severely limited by the 2 years that had passed since the murders. Nevertheless, Wood's detailed, damning confession was enough to secure the immediate arrest of both women. The 2 female criminals who shared a deadly pact had now used the truth to betray each other, leading them directly to separate cells and ensuring their lethal lovers' bond was finally broken. The ensuing legal proceedings were entirely dependent on the word of one of the murderers. Cathy Wood agreed to a plea deal, stipulating that she would provide full detailed testimony against Gwendolyn Graham in exchange for a significantly lighter sentence. Wood's testimony became the prosecution's star evidence, solidifying a narrative that was key to the case. Graham was the sadistic mastermind and primary killer, while Wood was the tormented, psychologically subservient accomplice who was unable to break free from the relationship. This strategy, though ethically murky for many, proved successful in securing the conviction of the more dominant killer. The jury had little doubt about Graham's culpability. The prosecution successfully presented her as a woman defined by extreme antisocial tendencies and a profound lust for dominance, a hunger that led directly to the deaths of 5 people. Gwendolyn Graham was ultimately convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder. In 1992, the judge ensured that her sentence reflected the severity of her acts. She was handed 5 consecutive life terms in prison. This sentence guaranteed she would never again pose a threat to the community, condemning her to die behind bars and ensuring the lethal lovers would never be reunited. Cathy Wood, though fully complicit in the deaths, received a dramatically different outcome. The court accepted the argument that her severe codependency and history of being a victim of emotional manipulation warranted leniency. She was sentenced to 20 to 40 years in prison. This sentence ignited considerable debate, as many argued that participation in serial murder, regardless of one's role, should warrant a much harsher punishment. However, Wood upheld her end of the bargain, serving 31 years of her sentence, a sentence that gave her a chance at a future. Wood was eventually released on parole in 2020. The judicial system, by handing down these two wildly divergent sentences, officially recognized a clear distinction in culpability between the dominant killer and her highly codependent partner. While Graham was deemed a predator who acted out of pure malice, Wood was viewed as an enabler whose criminal path was forged by her own weakness and fear. The dramatic difference in their fate stands as a permanent point of contention in the history of this deadly partnership. The case of the lethal lovers remains one of the most terrifying examples of shared pathology in American criminal history and underscores the unique danger of the female criminal duo. It is a story where emotional codependency, rather than being a source of strength, mutated into a mechanism for serial homicide, leaving a trail of vulnerable, voiceless victims in its wake. This was a crime not born of opportunity, but of a calculated shared psychological darkness that could only thrive when the two women were together. The story forces us to confront the uncomfortable nature of complicity and the line between instigator and accomplice. The American justice system attempted to draw that line, sentencing the dominant Gwen Graham to die in prison, while offering Cathy Wood a chance at freedom for her cooperation. The essential question remains: does a subservient role, even one driven by fear and love, truly reduce the moral weight of murder? Is the act of enabling evil truly less culpable than the act of execution? For the families of Viola Cricker, Robert Evans, Rachel Bell, Bessie Griffin, and Marguerite Adams, the innocent patients of Alpine Manor, the answer will forever be a resounding rejection of that premise. Gwen Graham remains separated from her partner, a figure of pure malice serving multiple life sentences. Cathy Wood walks free, having been released on parole, but she remains under the permanent heavy shadow of her lethal pact, forever judged by the secret she kept for so long. Their case stands as a permanent warning about the profound betrayal of trust that can occur when the people we rely on the most harbor the darkest intent. Thank you for confronting the darkness with us on The Female Criminal. If you found this extended look into the motives and actions of the lethal lovers insightful, please give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe. Your support is crucial in allowing us to continue bringing these complex stories to light. We'll see you in the next one.